We're live. As someone who has endured a federal arraignment, I feel qualified to help you understand what Donald Trump will experience today during his arraignment process in Miami. While my arraignment was a long time ago, I remember it as easily as I remember my birthday because it's a day that, how do you forget getting arraigned in federal court? So I want to provide some perspective from my experience with many of our clients of white collar advice have endured over the years with hopes that it helps everyone better understand this wretched system. And if you were a defendant traversing the system who may face an arraignment, I hope it helps you better understand what's coming. Now, at the arraignment that I think starts here in a couple of hours, 3 p.m. Eastern time, you can expect the judge, and it will not be the regular judge. It's going to be a magistrate judge. You can expect this magistrate judge to open the hearing, potentially reading the charges aloud in the courtroom. Now, when I heard them read my charges aloud, I was ready to pass out. It was embarrassing, humiliating. My parents were there thinking, what has our son done? It's not easy, but judges will do this to ensure the defendant hears it and understands the severity of the accusations, and it gives them a chance to mount their defense. After the charges are read, you can expect the former president to enter a plea of not guilty. Then the judge is going to lay out the bond conditions. It could be secured or unsecured. In my case, I had a $100,000 unsecured bond. I signed a piece of paper. In many cases, it's secured. People put up planes, real estate, money. If they don't have it, someone may actually, put a deed, sign their deed of property over to secure the bond. He will not be taken into custody today, though, as I'll discuss in this live video. Many people who are in pretrial supervision get into trouble and then get taken into custody, like my co-defendant did many years ago. After the judge goes through the bond conditions, most likely he or she will get another court date on the calendar. They may also take his passport. I know they took mine, and they take the lion's share of defendants' passports at an arraignment hearing. After that process, he will go upstairs with his lawyers and officially be arrested and taken into custody by the United States Marshals. And it's a humbling experience. I'll never forget it, right? So you are in custody. A benefit perhaps to the former president today is that he will get credit for one full day in custody while going through this arraignment process. While going through the arraignment with the United States Marshals, they are going to fingerprint him. They will take a mugshot, and they will take a DNA sample. They'll put a swab Q-tip in his mouth, and it will become a part of the DNA database. So they're going to take that DNA sample. Now, I understand, I think it was the government said that they were not going to handcuff him or put him in custody or in a holding cell. Now, I can tell you from experience, they said the same thing to me, yet I sat there for about 2.5 hours waiting to fully get processed in. In retrospect, 2.5 hours is nothing. People have endured weeks and months and years in segregation. So it's not a good idea to complain about the process or say that it's unfair. So many federal prisoners going through an arraignment endure it. In fact, many of them get remanded and don't have an opportunity to post bond. I share this because if he is sitting in a holding cell or detained, it happens, big deal, move on. He wouldn't be the only one, though it could be surprising to a number of people, as it was to me. After that process of the fingerprinting and the mugging and the DNA sample, he will then move upstairs with his lawyers and meet with a pretrial services officer. And this pretrial services officer, it's a very important person. It's an employee or clerk of the court who will lay out the condition of the former president's, like his pretrial service conditions, what he can and cannot do. It's in the former president's interest or in your interest, if you're ever going to meet with a pretrial services officer, to be humble, to be kind, to be deferential, to recognize this person will be overseeing you in the weeks and months to come. And it's essential that you or the former president is compliant, because that can influence what happens at sentencing. If someone isn't compliant on pretrial supervision, it doesn't really buoy the argument that they should avoid prison if convicted, because they can't even follow the terms of their condition. In this live stream, I'm not going to cover the myriad conditions that could take place on pretrial supervision. We could be here for days, and I know your time is busy, though I will cover from memory a few conditions that are pretty pervasive amongst all federal white collar crime defendants, including, as obvious as it sounds, do not commit another crime or do not commit a crime. It is stunning how many people in the pretrial services phase who are doing all they can to avoid prison, win at trial, or get the shortest sentence possible engage in new criminal conduct, primarily by way of like an obstruction charge. For example, a number of people have co-defendants in a case, and oftentimes those co-defendants shouldn't communicate. I was surprised to read this morning that the former president was traveling to Miami with his colleague, who was also indicted, because my initial opinion was the government indicted his colleague in part with hopes that that person potentially would cooperate, flip, take a plea deal, and cooperate against the former president. I don't know what will happen. What I know is it is essential that if you are going through pretrial supervision, you do not commit a new crime, because that will immediately get you taken into custody. And of course, it will derail your eventual sentencing hearing. Another condition is they may restrict his travel. I know they did for me. I know anytime I traveled, I needed permission. I know that I needed to write my pretrial services officer at least a week in advance. And if I didn't, I would be reprimanded if I tried to travel within that week window. So they could absolutely restrict his travel. They, again, will have potentially taken his passport. There's a very good chance they could restrict like websites that he has access to for a variety of reasons. They may put a condition on him, no drug or alcohol use, which is not terribly uncommon. One thing the pretrial services officer will eventually do, and they will let him know this is a condition of his pretrial supervision, they're going to visit the home. He may be asked to at some point turn in financials. It's a extensive accounting. It's kind of a nightmare to complete everything. It was for me. Imagine the records that he will have to turn over and complete. But this pretrial services officer will visit the home, and he will be asked to get rid of any guns or ammunition that he has. Indeed, if the former president is convicted, he will have forfeited his Second Amendment right to bear arms. They may put him on a curfew, restrict how long he could be out in the community versus how long he needs to be at home. And a very common condition of pretrial supervision is putting an ankle bracelet on someone. Again, I don't expect that to happen today. In our experience, the pretrial services stage is crucial because you have a court employee reviewing and analyzing your conduct over a period of time leading up to a guilty plea, or in this case, a trial. And studies suggest there could be a conviction just because so many people lose once they go to trial. So this person is really in a position to influence what could happen throughout this process, as they have a direct line to the prosecutor and judge. If someone violates a common condition of their supervision, what happens? It kind of depends on the severity of it. In our experience, if it is a minor infraction, like you were outside of the curfew longer than was necessary, you moved jobs without disclosing it quickly enough, they could give you a warning. If it happens again, they could indeed put that ankle bracelet on you. And then if it happens again, as was the case with my co-defendant, that pretrial services officer can go to the federal judge and say, he's not complying. Like, he just doesn't get it. And I think it's in the interest of everyone that he be taken into custody. And over the last 14 years, our team has received dozens of calls from family members to tell us, my loved one's been out on pretrial for 6 months or a year, and his pretrial services officer had enough. And for that reason, they suggested to the judge that he go into custody, and he's sitting in the detention center. The problem for the former president is he wants to win re-election. His highest value, most likely, is re-election, because that re-election would also help offset any of these legal issues that he has. So for him, probably more than any defendant over the last many, many years, it's essential that he remain free while on pretrial supervision, which is why it's essential he get off to a good start today with this pretrial services officer by remaining humble and deferential and kind and understanding the influence this person has. Because if he were ever to get taken into custody, it would be very difficult. It would be impossible to campaign from segregation 23 hours a day, because he's not going to be in the general compound. If he was taken into custody, he's going to be in segregation. And like I said, 23 hours a day, showering 3 times a week, exercising for 15 minutes a piece, 15 minutes at a time. So if his highest value is re-election, He needs to embrace the reality that's easier if I'm free in my community campaigning, which is why anyone on pretrial supervision, whether it's a former president, me, or somebody else, needs to really understand how everything they say, everything they write, everything they put out in the community with their platform could influence the way the court perceives them, because it would be a total game changer to the detriment of some, and others will be absolutely thrilled, regardless of the political spectrum that you're on. If his highest value is reelection, he can only do that if he remains free, which is why he has got to remain compliant on pretrial supervision. Everyone says they're going to remain compliant. Not everybody does. Once you are in the crosshairs of this really difficult system, it is just hard to get out of it unscathed. I've said it before and I'll say it again. You have got to put yourself in the shoes of the stakeholders, a federal judge, a probation officer, a pretrial services officer. They are cynical. They view you not as you view yourself or as others who love and support you view you. They view you as a criminal, and the glass is always half empty. And if they feel as if any defendant, whether it's me, the former president, or you, are doing things that threaten the security of the court or the community, or doing things that are not compliant, it's not like second chances here. Oh, we're going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Maybe if the infraction isn't so severe, but if they view it as a significant infraction, there, we don't have time for this. He doesn't get it. We're going to take him into custody, which again would be detrimental. So there you have it, a quick live video helping you understand the arraignment process for the former president, Donald Trump, from my perspective as a former federal prisoner. In closing, it's one day amidst a very long journey in going through the criminal justice system. If I got through it, if millions of others have gotten through it, certainly he will get through it. I just encourage him to put himself in the shoes of these people, many of whom will want to take him into custody if he says and does things that are not compliant with his pretrial service conditions. Has to be very careful. Thank you for watching this quick live stream.